Hello everybody, thank you for joining us today. It's Laura here from the DevonAlliance and I am joined by Wendy from the NMC to talk to us about revalidation. So welcome Wendy.
Hello, lovely to be here.
Nice to see you. So we're going to talk a little bit about revalidation today and the requirements in general. So a lot of the nurses that we've recruited, they're now in their third year in the UK, which is amazing. So they're going to start to come up to revalidation. So I know that Wendy's got a brilliant presentation to share with us, and then we've got some questions from our nurses, and Wendy's going to try and answer those as well. So thank you. Ready when you are.
Absolutely ready. Really excited to be here and really excited for everyone embarking on their first revalidation. It seems a bit scary, but actually, once you get into it, you're going to get really quite excited yourself and really actually enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. Let me share the presentation that I've got.
So, this presentation is around successfully achieving revalidation. So if I could have the next slide, please.
Of course.
Hello, my name's Wendy. I'm a nursing education advisor. I am a registered nurse and I revalidated for the third time last summer. Here's me. That's in my last job, which was before I came to the NMC, which is as pre-registration education lead nurse. There's me in the blue. And next to me is one of the student nurses who's wearing my student nurse uniform from the early 1980s.
Oh,
wow. She called it retro. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. But this was on Nurses Day, celebrating nurses. So
that's fab.
And she looks so proud of herself.
She
really
does. Yeah, that looks lovely.
And I once fitted into that uniform. Next slide, please. So, what we're going to talk about this afternoon, I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of the NMC because I've got this opportunity and it's really good for folk to understand what we do and actually what we don't do. We're going to talk a little bit about what revalidation is and again, what it isn't. We're going to go through in a little bit of detail the requirements and evidence for your revalidation and the resources and templates that are available for you. Some of which are mandatory, you have to use. Some of them are really recommended. And we have time to go through some questions at the end.
Fab.
So, here at the NMC, what we want is the same as everyone else does, and I think this is really important. Safe, kind and effective nursing and midwifery that improves everyone's health and well-being. And upheld high professional standards in nursing and midwifery, protect the public, inspire public confidence and professional pride. There's our vision and our purpose. Next slide, please. We're the independent regulator of all nurses and midwives in the UK and nursing associates in England. And we say nursing associates in England because that's where they are at the moment.
Okay.
Not in Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland, although we have got the red flag to start the process for nursing associates in Wales. So this is the number of nurses, midwives and nursing associates we have on our register, and this is from earlier this year. These are our latest figures. And 2% of the population, we reckon, is on our register. So that's a lot of people.
It is.
If you're on a bus, there's pretty likely to be another nurse, midwife or nursing associate on that bus with you. And certainly if you're on the London Underground, there's likely to be several. There's a lot of us. So totally over 800,000 people.
Brilliant.
We've got 3 key roles: regulate, support and influence. Our absolute core role is regulation. So this is around making sure that we have the right standards and the right people on our register. But to make sure we do that well, we need to support our professions and the public, and also share our intelligence and work with others in that influence space around workforce planning and sector-wide decision making. Next slide. I had to choose one slide that explains what we do at the NMC, it would be this one.
Good.
So it's all there. So we, as I say, we set these standards, the high educational professional standards. So when nurses, midwives, and nursing associates qualify in practice, they've got to deliver safe, kind, and effective care. These standards are what we call outcome focused. We don't say, for instance, a student nurse has got to do 36 dressings. We need to.
Oh, you keep dropping out, Wendy. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me again now? Shall I,
Yes.
if I move a little closer? My internet can be a little bit shaky.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Is that better?
Yes. So we've got to 36 dressings.
Yeah, we don't say that a student nurse needs to do 36 dressings in order to get onto the register. What we say that at a point of registration, a nurse needs to know about aseptic technique, about wound healing, and see that within the context of care of that person.
Yeah.
And universities produce their own curriculums to meet those standards. We don't set curriculum. What we do instead is we trust universities to put together their curriculum, and then we approve that curriculum against our standards, and then ongoing quality assurance of those programs.
Yeah.
So that's why some people see some variance in different regions. Somebody may say, oh, I had to do 6 weeks of surgery. We don't say that. The university actually sets that in order to meet the standards of our curriculum.
Okay, makes sense.
To do that, and then we maintain that register of professionals who are eligible and fit to practice. So people who come onto our register either by following a programme of education in the UK or by following our overseas process, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And we then we do investigate concerns about professionals in the register. Tiny minority of professionals each year, fewer than 1% of our registrants come to the attention of our fitness to practice process. And there's the big myth that the NMC are here to take your PIN away. We don't want it. We want you to have your PIN. We want you to have the ability to deliver safe and effective and kind care. We also promote lifelong learning in different ways, and one of those is around revalidation. For nurses, midwives, and nursing associates to keep developing practice and exercise throughout their career. We also have post-registration courses, and actually in terms of courses we regulate that are post-registration, they're only specialist public health nurses and health visiting type qualifications that we regulate. Things like for practice assessor course, things like critical care courses, we don't regulate. And universities and other institutions actually set their own outcomes for those.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So next slide, please. And here it is, all again on one page, all about revalidation. So every 3 years, point of renewal, nurses, midwives, and nursing associates, and it's the same standards for all 3 professions, need to show that we're living by the code standards of practice and behaviour. And we do this by keeping a file, record, or portfolio of our experiences. And hopefully the first myth I'm going to bust is you don't need a specialist portfolio. Some folk will try and sell you a portfolio. I can't tell you exactly what to do. However, I spend my money on other things because it's just not necessary. What you need is 450 practice hours, 35 hours continuing professional development, which everyone knows as CPD. And that needs to be thinking about your developmental requirements, your scope of practice, the proficiencies. 20 hours of that CPD needs to be participatory, and what we mean by participatory is with others. It's not participatory in that you are taking part, because all CPD will be like that. So it's when you participate with others. So it's actually around that interaction with other people which makes it participatory. You don't have to be in the same room. You could be virtually in the same room.
Okay. So how would you document that if it was participatory?
It's exactly the same as you document any other CPD, of which using our forms, which are all available on our website, which I will go through in a bit more detail. So 20 hours that participatory, which means 15 can be not participatory. And I'm going to talk a bit through about precisely what that means. 5 pieces of practice-related feedback, 5 pieces of reflection, and then a reflective discussion with a reflective partner, and then confirmation. And everything there that you can see the link at the bottom of the page there. Everything's available by clicking that link. Next slide, please. And this is really important. Being a registered nurse is not just about knowing the code and standards, it's by living by them, using them to shape your day-to-day practice when caring for people, their families and carers, appreciating everyone's an individual, and that listening to their needs to safely navigate the opportunities and challenges in providing care together with your team. It's knowing your skills and compassion can truly make a difference in someone's life, because we're all working towards the same goal, as I said earlier, to ensure everyone receives safe, kind and effective care. And it's events like this which will produce your CPD, your reflections, your feedback, actually. Things like, just at the end of the day, reflecting on your day, thinking, yeah, I really did have an event this afternoon that really reinforced how everyone's an individual and how listening to their needs matter, and how I did safely navigate opportunities and challenges today. And knowing that, oh, actually, something I did really made a difference to someone's life. And I think it's really worthwhile keeping those in your mind when you start to think about preparing for your revalidation. Next slide, please. The main strength of revalidation is that it reinforces the code. It asks you to use this as the reference point for all of our requirements, including the written reflective accounts and your discussion. The code has a central role in the nursing and midwifery professions, and it really makes you think. Revalidation really makes you think about how the code applies in our everyday practice. So to fulfil our registration requirements, there in point 22, it tells us that we need to revalidate, essentially, meet any reasonable requests so we can oversee the registration process, keep to the prescribed hours of practice and carrying out CPD, and keep your knowledge and skills up to date. They're referring to the CPD, to reflection. And our standards of proficiency I talked a little bit about earlier. And one of our purposes of revalidation is around that safe and effective practice, keeping your knowledge and skills up to date and developing new skills. Our standards of proficiency are regularly updated, and they apply to everyone on our register, not just students. Although they do set out what we expect students to know and to understand and be able to do to join the register, it's important for all registrants to be familiar with these recent standards, identify which relate to your scope of practice, and to identify your training needs. It'll help you advance your practice and be equipped to supervise and assess students, which is, again, an essential part of your role. And a really it's probably the right time to talk about scope of practice here. Everyone's scope of practice is very different. This is why often at the NMC people say, oh, that's a bit vague, it's not precise enough. And it's quite difficult to be very precise when we need something to apply to all the professionals in our register, something that works for someone who works in dermatology outpatients, to somebody who works in critical care, or learning disabilities community work, or social care for people with mental health problems. So that's why it's really important you make this your own. You
Yeah.
your scope of practice, and be familiar with those standards of proficiency and see which bits work for you, which bits are really important to you. Me, as a registrant working in the NMC, it will be very different. However, if I got a job in a surgical ward next week, I would need to update myself on some elements of that practice. For instance, cannulation. I'll probably need someone to observe me do some cannulation, and probably on a mannequin before I get let loose on a living person. However, that's about manipulation of the device, and I will need some supervision with that. But things like application of the code, I'll be fine with. I would be fine with areas of consent and mental capacity and the communication skills required to explain why this person might need a cannula. So it's important to really think about making this your own for your own role, and also think about, if you change role, what your requirements will be, but also what you've already got that you're applying to that new role.
That's interesting, because you can bring in training that you've got then for that new role as part of your CPD for your revalidation.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. Next slide, please. What revalidation isn't, and I think it's important to get our head around, it's not an assessment of a nurse midwife's or nursing associate's fitness to practice. It's not a way of raising concerns about a person's fitness to practice either. There are processes for doing that. Revalidation is not it. If there's something that your manager is concerned with, or in fact you're concerned with, don't wait until it's time for revalidation to talk about it. Do it whilst it's on your mind. Do it in the present. And not waiting till revalidation, because that's not the purpose of revalidation. Next slide, please. Sorry, Laura.
No, I just said that's good. That's good to have that knowledge, isn't it, as well?
It is, yeah. And I think it's really important to know that we're not thinking that revalidation is a stick to beat nurses with. Far from it. It's a celebration, really, of what you've done over those last 3 years.
That's good.
So, our requirements talk about practice hours. No, so what counts as practice hours? This is practice as a registered nurse. And it's important to recognise it doesn't say clinical hours here. It says practice hours, because the practice of registered nurses is very wide. I'm a registered nurse. This is my practice. Precisely what I'm doing now. Talking to other registrants about their revalidation is my practice. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it well without also being a registrant. I bring that authenticity of my experience and my knowledge to this role. So next slide gives us a bit more detail. You can only count practice hours that you've undertook when registered with the NMC. You can't count any unregistered practice. So any hours before you received your PIN, or hours completed when working in entirely different regulated professions such as paramedic or medical doctor. Some people do hold more than one qualification, more than one registration. Those practice hours should reflect our current scope of practice. This must be around working under the code. And the duty to recognise and work within the limits of your competence. You must meet the practice hours in a role when you rely on your skills, knowledge, and experience of being a registered nurse, midwife, and nursing associate. I'm relying on my skills, knowledge, and experience of being a registered nurse, for instance, to talk about revalidation. So this includes being your practice as a nurse, midwife, SCIFM, so that's she's community public health nurse qualification, or nursing associate in roles that require you to have that registration. In practice, where your employment contract maybe doesn't expressly require you to be registered with us, but you absolutely rely on your skills, knowledge, experience of being a registered nurse, midwife, and nursing associate. So these will include roles in public health or nursing midwifery management, commissioning, policy, and education. We're a very wide, broad church with nursing. I can remember very early on when revalidation was brought in, and a colleague, we both worked in the education department at the hospital at the time, said, oh, we're going to have to go out onto the wards and do drug rounds and things for it to be our revalidation. Actually, what we were doing there, for instance, teaching the preparation for practice assessor course, absolutely relied on our skill, knowledge,
That's
and
interesting.
experience as registered nurses.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I previously worked with a chief executive who was a nurse, and I think this is probably before revalidation came in, and she would pick up extra shifts as a nurse because she said it kept her pin up to date. So
You
yeah,
don't have to. It can help with that
yeah,
authenticity, and knowing what's, if you're a manager, knowing what the people you manage are experiencing. That can certainly be something that may be part even of your CPD.
yeah,
Actually, going
true.
and shadowing someone in that role. However, it's not absolutely necessary, because cut me in half all the way through. Everything I do as a registered nurse. If I went onto a surgical ward today, I'll probably be fairly helpful,
Yeah,
but you wouldn't want me running the shift.
fair enough.
Next slide, please. So, as I said, things that can't be counted. So, hours in healthcare nursing with support role, in that separate regulated profession. And nurses who are doing the 18-month midwifery programme, there is an opportunity for registered nurses to apply to for a midwifery course, because midwifery is an entirely separate profession with different proficiencies and different standards. But nurses can take that shortened course,
Oh, cool.
just 18 months,
Yeah,
using their registration as a nurse to count as that different application process. But what they can't do is, whilst they're working as a student midwife, count that as revalidation hours to being a registered
okay.
nurse.
Yeah, because it's pre-registration. Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly, because they're learning to be a midwife
So
then.
everything's new.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, they won't be able to use any practice hours undertaken as a nurse. They will be able to use any practice hours undertaken as a nurse either before or after the midwifery course. And people who are dual registered as nurses and as midwives do need to have practice hours either as a nurse and as a midwife, to count towards their revalidation if they wish to revalidate for both professions. And exactly, associates. Nursing associates can be dual registered as a nursing associate and as a nurse. And if they wish to maintain both registrations, they will need to have practice hours when they're undertaking a role as a nurse. Or incidentally, some people do refer to themselves as dual registered when actually they are what we call someone with a dual award. And that's someone who's, for instance, child and adult qualifications, or adult or mental health, or one of those two or more of those fields.
Yeah.
And that's important because you don't have to do practice hours for each field.
Only the one you're registered in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well, no, because you may be registered in more than one field.
Yes.
If you are registered in more than one field, what you need to do is demonstrate within your practice hours that you're using the skills from both fields. For instance, if you worked in A&E with a mental health and an adult qualification, it will be very straightforward to show how you're using that mental health qualification and that adult nursing qualification in that area of practice.
Good.
Next slide, please. It's your practice hours logged template. This is available on our website. It should be very self-explanatory on how to complete this. Please don't record every shift. There's no need. You can just record the dates of your employment, the name and address of the organisation you're working for, and then your work setting. And you've got a list there, for instance, ambulance service, hospital, insurance or legal, home care, military, voluntary. Interestingly enough, regulation doesn't appear there, so I have to enter that separately. And then your scope of practice, be it in leadership, direct clinical care, education, quality assurance or inspections, number of hours. And for here, what I put is how many hours I'm employed per week and for how many weeks.
Okay.
Rather than each individual shift, because you will need an awful lot of paper
if you're doing it for each shift.
Yeah.
I suppose you would use it to document as you see fit when you've got something to say for your revalidation. Yeah.
Exactly. So you'd record, for instance, if you've got a part-time role, 30 hours a week, just record that 30 hours a week in this work setting. And I also do 7.5 hours every fortnight working in a school as a school nurse. So you'd document that separately. So if each job, or if you change jobs or roles halfway through the revalidation period, it should all be very straightforward. And we're not aiming to catch you out with this form. It's simply a record of your practice hours. Next slide, please. CPD, continuing professional development. So, as I mentioned earlier, 35 hours relevant to your scope of practice. So something that's meaningful to you for your role. And you keep a record of this. And you keep a record of the method of CPD. Was it online? Was it face-to-face? Was it a teaching session? Was it shadowing a manager, for instance? The topic, how it relates to your practice, the dates this occurred, how long this was it participatory, any evidence. Now, evidence, this is interesting. You don't need to produce a certificate. A certificate of attendance certifies you've attended, nothing else. So you can certainly use other methods of evidencing that you were there. Your notes from the day. In my last revalidation, I had a picture which was on the website of me attending a conference. It was at the back of my head, but it was definitely me. I popped that in my revalidation file. But we don't require certificates. Remembering certificates of attendance certify that you've attended and nothing else. So think about how else this is evidenced. Was there a note on the off duty, for instance, saying you were attending a study day? Have you got the form in which you used to apply for that study day, or the letter to say thank you for attending that study day? Study days here, not all CPD needs to be a study day. You can be very creative around what your your CPD is. If you could have the next slide, please. Just think about what counts as CPD, because it doesn't always have to be a study day. It can be lots of different ways of you learning things. Slide, please. The CPD is a learning activity that you undertake separate from your normal practice, different from the everyday learning that you'll do. Any you participate in to be relevant to your scope of practice, and your learning, how this links to your scope, how it applies to you and your role, what's meaningful for you. Because we don't prescribe any particular type of CPD, because you're best deciding what learning activities are most suitable and beneficial to you. Training, for instance, can't be included if it's something, for instance, fire or health and safety training. Those are statutory. You've got to do them to do their job. How if you do, for instance, safeguarding training, and this makes you think, oh, I need to think very differently about how I work. I think about things. This has been a bit of a big thing for me, learning this safeguarding training. It's making me think differently. Get that down, record that, and that's good CPD. It may even, at the end of the study, think, oh, I'm going to go and look that up. I'm going to do a bit more reading. Capture that. That's brilliant CPD. How would you capture that? Make a note of it. Simply write down on the 5th of September, after my safeguarding training, I thought despite me area, I thought I really need to learn a bit more about child protection, because sometimes the adults I meet have children at home. So I'm going to go and read up on this, and this is what I've learned. Absolutely perfect CPD, really good, really relevant to your role. You can absolutely relate that to the code. You can absolutely relate that to our proficiencies. And you would have learned something that's going to change the way you view your work.
Absolutely. I think as well, with the trust that I work at, the Oliver McGowan training has completely been rolled out as well. So
Yes.
that's a new one. So if people have revalidated, 6 years, they're not new to revalidation. That is something that they can think about putting in, and especially the international educated nurses. That's definitely something as well. And it's quite long. I think it's a couple of hours, and then you have to do another phase 2 as well. So that's some good CPD hours there, definitely.
Absolutely. I did my Oliver McGowan training recently, and it's not necessarily mandated because I don't work in clinical care. However, crikey, I learned lots, and that's definitely going towards my CPD hours. And thinking about being creative, shadowing for instance, shadowing the bed manager. If you want to know how a hospital works, shadowing the bed manager or someone else in a similar role might be a good way of doing that. But it's about what you've learned, isn't it? It's not just about clocking up, oh, I did an hour. It's what did I learn in that hour? What's meaningful to me?
Yeah, fair enough.
Next slide, please. Here's how you record it. So the date you did it, the method. So, was this in a classroom? Was it e-learning? Was it reading? Was it a group of colleagues who've got together and said, oh, we need to learn a bit more about this. Let's get together and look at some current research.
Yeah, I like that. That's a
it
good
could
idea.
be very informal. Topics you've covered, and how this links to the code and the standards of proficiency, how many hours, and how many of that was participatory, that is with others. And that's the only form you need for CPD, and that's get it there, pop it on your desktop, either your actual desktop as paper or in on your computer. So you can do it as you go along, so we don't get this scramble right at the
Good
end.
idea. Yeah, definitely.
Slide, please. Bit of feedback. We all get feedback about our roles. Sometimes we don't always recognise it as feedback. Um, around communication, and that thought, that slide I had right at the beginning about I've walked away and I'm thinking I really made a difference in someone's day. What was it that told me that I made a difference in that person? Or actually, what they did say thank you, but what did it really mean? What difference did I make? What did I do that was above and beyond? I mean, that's just somebody saying thank you, nurse, can be your part of what you do next, which is important, and how you've really considered how that relates to the code and what was it that I did that made a difference. Your appraisal is feedback. And thank you from student nurses you've worked with. They can be a great source of feedback. Think about how that feedback informs and shapes your practice. Remembering confidentiality, no personal information, please. I really struggle with the feedback element of revalidation. But actually, if you kind of release your creative thinking, it can be really one of the easiest and most enjoyable parts of this. Thinking about that verbal feedback, say to me, how do I evidence this? You don't need to, you need to just get your thoughts down on paper. To talk about one that I used, not this revalidation, but the one before, when I was working as pre-registration education lead. It was February, and I was sent to A&E to help. And I'll keep it short because it could be quite a long story. But there was a chap in the waiting room looking really, really anxious, and I said, "Hey, you all right?" And he said, "No, I've got to have a CT scan and I'm really worried." And I went, "Okay, let me find out a bit more about this for you." Spoke to one of the staff nurses and said, "What's going on with the guy in the waiting room who looks really anxious?" And they said, "Oh, don't worry about him. He's just clucking." And I went, "What's that about?" He was withdrawing from opioid. I said, "Yeah, why CT scan?" "Oh, yeah. He's got a really nasty cough. He's got pain in his chest. We think he might have a pulmonary embolism. That's why he's got to have a CT scan." Okay. Spent minutes talking to him around the CT scan. It's more of a donut than a tunnel. You haven't got a pulmonary embolism. But if you have, we can treat it. But if you don't know you've got it, this can be very serious indeed. That's all it took. And he felt a lot more relaxed. I completed my shift, helping the best I can in A&E. Saw this chap later in the car park, and he was there, cigarette like this, and went, "Oi!" I went, "Oh, hello." "Oi!" Called me over and went, "You, all right, you are." And that was his feedback. That's what I recorded. But because for this gentleman who had huge mistrust of healthcare,
Yeah.
He just saying that was a really big thing for him.
Yeah.
And I went back to my nice, clean office when no one was shouting at me, and reflected a bit on that and felt really chuffed with myself that I'd done a good thing. I'd made a difference. But then my reflection took me elsewhere.
Yeah.
It took me, what was it around that A&E nurse that had a bit of compassion fatigue there? She didn't see how anxious this person was, didn't really see how a few moments chat would make a difference. So I was running the perception program at the time. So we actually explored fatigue as part of our preceptorship and how to recognise it in others, and had that discussion. So that just little interaction in the hospital car park as
Yeah.
feedback really made me think about my practice.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everyone who's listening to this will have those events, but it's the thinking about how this informs or improves your practice that you do next that makes the difference.
Yeah. And in 3 years, you need to collect 5 pieces of evidence like
5
that.
pieces, yeah.
Okay.
Which, if you have 3 appraisals over those three years, there's 3.
Yeah.
But
True.
it's nice to have a variety. And
Yeah.
if you just turn on your radar for
Yeah.
looking for feedback,
Yeah.
you will get
Yeah.
pieces very easily, and it can be really enjoyable.
Yeah.
The other thing to do is to recognise that colleagues need feedback.
Yeah.
And if we get into the habit of giving it,
Yeah.
we all get more feedback.
Yeah.
So, and again, it's those little things, isn't it,
Yeah.
that can make a real difference.
Yeah.
Saying, hey, I just noticed when you gave that person their tablets to go home with, you really spent time answering their questions, and they really seem to appreciate it.
Nice.
That took, what, less than 30
Yeah.
seconds.
And I suppose even like thank you cards to the wards and things.
Yes, absolutely. But taking the next step. What
Yes.
was it about this
Yes.
person that
Yeah.
I did that
Yeah.
made a difference to them?
Yeah.
And how can I continue making a difference to other people now I know that?
Yeah. I like that.
Thank you. Next slide. So, variety of sources. Patients, service users, carers or students. Students are, as I said, very good at giving feedback. From colleagues, in managers, in different areas. Complain. And again, it's what you do, it's how this can make you think differently. Team performance reviews, serious events reviews, all sorts. It could be written, verbal, formal, informal. It's all out there, but it's what you do with it, which is most important. Hi, please. So you've got a log all available on our website, which you can just keep that feedback logged. Just keep doing it. We all have those moments at the end of a shift, walking towards the car, waiting at the bus stop, in the bath, wherever you do your best thinking, where you relay what's happened that day, and you will have that moment of going, oh, hang on, that was feedback I could really work with. Get it down. Get that down, because it will come in for your revalidation. Next slide, please. And then we have those 5. These are 5 written accounts, which could relate to your CPD, your feedback. Example of one of my reflective accounts was my chap in the hospital car park. Or any other event in your professional practice. Be shift where you walk away and go, where did everything go right? That was a great day. What was it we did that made a difference? Or those events that we all walk away from going, okay, that wasn't our finest hour. What could we have done differently? And it doesn't have to be the big things. In fact, often the very effective reflective accounts can be about differences.
Yeah, it's the big, yeah, exciting.
Yeah,
Really interesting.
thank you. How do these accounts relate to the code? This is what's vital. And this works twofold. It works really for you to think about the code and get to know it a little better. I'm sure you all know it, but I find different ways of thinking about the code every time I look at it and how it applies to different events and different situations, and also to our proficiencies. Next slide, please. It's about that instance of CPD, positive and negative. I don't believe in negative feedback. I think all feedback's constructive. It could be about a conversation with a colleague, about a significant or professional event, anything that's made you think about your practice. Next slide, please. there's those reflective accounts forms. Back when I was working in the education department talking about certificates, I stopped giving out certificates at the end of study days. Instead, every participant had one of these where they actually recorded their reflections on that CPD straight away. And then it was there, ready for when their revalidation
That's
was
so
due.
good. Such a good idea.
Just get it down.
Yeah.
Because with our reflective accounts for revalidation, this isn't an academic exercise. We don't expect it to be referenced and spelt correctly. To be meaningful to you. That's what's most important. Meaningful to you, to relate to the code and relate to the proficiencies. That's what you can make a difference, or it's even perhaps made you think, hang on, I need to know more about something.
Yeah.
Our team needs to do something differently. And what have you done with that? So very simple. What was the nature of the either CPD, participating feedback or event? What did you learn? And what you're going to change?
Yeah.
How's this relevant to the code? What happened? What did you learn? What are you going to do differently?
Yeah.
Simple as that.
I think it's good to know that, you know, these reflective account forms aren't asking for people how they change the world. You know, what big thing did you put into place? You know, it's not just the big things, it's also the little things as well. Yeah.
It's little things with big impacts.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And important to your world.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's vital, which is why we can't prescribe what this needs to be, because it needs to be meaningful to each registrant. So then you have a reflective discussion. This needs to be with another registrant, and it's an opportunity to talk about you. We don't do that enough. And it's around that 5 reflective pieces, and you can go into greater depth and have that discussion. It can be a challenging discussion, which we welcome, you know, that someone's saying, oh, so why did you do it like that and not like this? And you can say, well, this is because this is about you and what you did. And it's an opportunity to really explore what happened. So think about who to have that reflective conversation with. If your manager is a fellow registrant, great. You can have that reflective discussion with your manager, but it doesn't have to be with your manager. I have mine with a peer.
Okay. And what are you reflecting on? Pieces of practice?
Reflecting on those 5 reflective pieces that you've already written.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Which brings on to which is the reflective discussion.
Yeah.
Confirmation, which you can do at the same time if your manager is another registrant.
Okay.
Because the confirmation is around going through all of those revalidation requirements, looking through that file or portfolio, looking at the evidence of those 450 practice hours, of those 35 hours CPD, and how much of it was participatory, how much was not, looking at the 5 pieces of practice-related feedback and those reflections. Plus, your confirmer also confirms that all this has happened, that you've done your practice hours, CPD, feedback and reflection, and had that reflective discussion, and that you're of good health and character. There's a health and character declaration, and that you've got professional indemnity agreement, which is a code requirement. And if you're an employee, that's straightforward, but it's nice to have a copy in your portfolio.
Yeah.
And then there's a process that you go through on our website to say, yes, this has all happened. Your confirmer also does something to say, yes, this has all happened.
Okay.
We take a sample of registrants, provide additional information each year, and this is a sample for verification, and it's as much about testing our processes rather than looking for people who have not done it right.
Yeah.
It's actually testing our processes most of all.
And how big or small is said sample? Do you know?
I don't know. There you are.
Just a sample.
I shall find out.
Interesting. No, that is really interesting.
All those resources and templates are on our website, all there.
Great.
So practice hours, templates recommended, the CPD log is recommended, as is the practice related feedback is recommended.
Yeah.
The reflective accounts form and the discussion form is a mandate. You have to do that along with the confirmation form.
Yeah.
Everything's available either individually or
Yeah.
together on one click.
Amazing.
There are also some examples of completed forms and dates on the same site, and there are also some revalidation stories with registrants telling us about their experiences
Oh,
of
that's so
revalidation.
helpful.
All
So
there on the
helpful.
website.
And I love that in the document's name, they've even got, recommended or mandatory. And that's just so helpful. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's all very, very straightforward.
Yeah.
So don't put it off. It's very easy to go, oh, it's too difficult. I'm not going to do it yet.
Yeah.
Just chip away at it.
Yeah.
I spend probably an hour or two when my revalidation period is coming, just tidying things up and making sure I've got everything.
Yeah.
Everything else is something I squirrel away
Yeah.
throughout that 3-year period. It used to go into a shoebox under the bed. It now goes onto a file on my desktop, which is called Revalidation Shoebox.
Bit of an upgrade, but yeah, that sounds amazing. Well done.
So hopefully we've done everything we've set out to do.
I think so.
So if you could click for me. Hey, so we have done a brief overview of the NMC.
Yeah.
We have looked about what revalidation is and what it isn't. Next click. We've looked at the requirement evidence and we've looked at the resource templates available, which leads me to any questions.
Fab. Right, I'll stop sharing the slideshow so I can bring up my Word document that I've saved. So I've asked a couple of our nurses just for them to ask any questions. So I've got a couple. So the first one is, during our preceptorship, we were informed that some documentation we use for preceptorship can also be used in our first revalidation. I would like to know if this still applies.
It's never not applied. And that depends if it's CPD, if it's feedback.
Yeah.
So it's most likely to be CPD, and I'm not sure what we mean by forms. It depends what that is. If it's something around learning, it's CPD. And certainly any learning that you did as part of your preceptorship, any feedback as you had as part of your preceptorship, will certainly be contributing towards your revalidation. There's no reason why not, as long as all the other things I've spoken around apply.
Cool. Okay, thank you for that. That's really interesting. So someone has said that they have seen and heard a lot of people talk about a booklet, and they have used it for revalidation. So they were asking is this booklet provided by the NMC or the trust?
Okay, I don't know what your trust produces, so there might be something. However, all the paperwork you need is there on our website.
Excellent.
Plus, there is a handbook about revalidation, which you can either download or read online, which gives you all the information you need.
So helpful. So can you start your revalidation process about 2 to 3 months before the actual date?
You start your revalidation process as soon as you've just revalidated, or as soon as you go into the register. It's a 3-year process. It's
so
not
it just
a
rolls.
moment in time. It
Brilliant.
just rolls. So you start collecting things throughout those 3 years. However, I think what we're really talking about with this question is when you can start your revalidation application.
Right.
And what you need to be doing is to make sure you're registered with NMC online.
Yeah.
And that the email address that we have is your current email address.
Yeah.
Then you will get a registration renewal notice around 60 days before your revalidation application is due.
Okay.
And then that revalidation window is open.
Okay.
So
60 days before, and that's your opportunity to get all your documents in.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You don't send all your documents in.
No.
We don't want your portfolio.
Yeah.
All we want is the mandatory parts, and the website actually just talks you through exactly what you need to do. It's very, very, very intuitive and straightforward. So you've got that 60-day break. So it opens and then closes it after 60 days. So you have got that time to do it. So you get yourself ready.
Yeah.
And then when you're ready and you've had your reflective discussion and your confirmer's done what the confirmer needs to do, away you go. And do remember you also need to pay your registration fee at the same time. But if you've got a direct debit already set up, there's no need to change this.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so last question I've got is the revalidation that they write in the revalidation booklet. So I'm assuming that's one that they've been given from the NMC or a trust booklet. Do we also have to attach some handwritten or notes given to us by patients or colleagues?
Absolutely not. No, not unless
that goes along with what we said about the reflection, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the only paperwork you need is the paperwork that's on our website.
Brilliant.
So everyone now have an listen to this. Get yourself to the website and make yourself familiar.
Yeah, I'll put the website in the description below as well, so everyone can access it.
And it's all again in that presentation, which I'm sure you're going to make available.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Anybody that requests that would like the presentation, please email our team or ourselves, and we'll definitely get that out to you. But that was so helpful. Thank you so much, Wendy. I really enjoyed that.
Yes, it was really, really nice talking to you. I can talk about revalidation all day. I'm quite passionate. And if anyone's got any very specific questions, do drop them to Laura, and I'm sure you can pass those on to me.
Of course.
And I'll be happy to help. And it's really nice to have, if anyone wants a conversation around their revalidation, do approach Laura, and we can perhaps get our heads together.
That sounds good. Thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you for coming along today. It was a pleasure. Hope to speak to you soon.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.
Bye.
Take care.
Everyone.
Bye.